So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where the Soviet Union never collapses. So as we know, the Soviet Union not formally, but it collapsed in late 1991, and a bunch of new countries were born from it, such as, the three Baltic states, Ukraine, Belarus, the Caucasian countries, and a lot of Central Asian countries. But today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where that simply doesn't happen, and the Soviets stick around until the modern day. If you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to show some support by liking it, subscribing, commenting, sharing, and basically anything. You can also become a channel member to get early access to videos. I just got that feature, so if you do want to help out the channel even more, that option is available. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump straight into the scenario. Alright, so the year is 1990, and political stability in the Soviet Union is not very good. In fact, it's falling apart. However, some unforeseen circumstance happens, and it all magically gets fixed and everyone is happy. The Baltics are no longer thinking about rebellion, the Caucasians are no longer electing their own officials. That stuff simply isn't happening, and who knows why. I couldn't answer it because honestly I don't know how that would happen. How do you prevent the Soviet Union from collapsing? You would have to go back to like World War II. And maybe even before that. You might have to go back to when the communists took over and prevent that from happening. But then you wouldn't even have the Soviet Union. So the question stands, how do you stop the Soviet Union from collapsing? Likely answer is you can't, because it was doomed to collapse from the start. So taking a look at an alliance map here, we can see that there is the Warsaw Pact and there is NATO. So NATO in 1990 isn't as large as it is now. And that's due to the fact there's a lot more democratic countries now since the collapse of the Soviet Union and also the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact includes members who are also currently NATO members in real life, like Poland, the other half of Germany, Czechia, and Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. Those guys are all present day NATO members. But yeah, the Soviets are able to hold together, and with that they're also able to hold together their alliance. And for the sake of this video, we are mostly going to be focusing in on Europe, and that's because, going back and differing the borders of the 1990 world, it wouldn't be too hard, but I'm on a very tight time frame. I have to be done in 12 minutes. It's not happening. I'm gonna be a little bit late to what I need to do. That's fine. But yeah, we're focusing on Europe because the Soviet Union is predominantly in Europe, or at least its political aspect of it. So we have the remainder of the Warsaw Pact. East and West Germany do not unite into one like they did in 1990. But one interesting factor is Yugoslavia. Now, Yugoslavia had been on the downfall for a couple of years, I think since 1980 something, maybe 1981. And really, it was doomed to fall apart. All the different groups of people bundled into one country was never going to work out. And yeah, it was doomed to collapse since it was pretty much formed. And we know the Yugoslavians, they kind of broke away from the Soviets. Same thing with the Albanians, so they're kind of on their own neutral thing. However, they are still socialist in an aspect, but we do have a Yugoslavian civil war happening. So we see the Slovenians breaking away, and I am going off of a map here. I mean, obviously, because I wouldn't be able to draw it right if I wasn't. But the Slovenians break away up north here, as well as the Croats. Then we pretty much have the Serbs and the Macedonians. Now, in real life, Yugoslavia was tampered with by the NATO forces. We had the Yugoslav Wars, which lasted pretty much up until 2000, I think. It's actually kind of crazy to me how much I don't know about, like, really modern stuff, because, this stuff ended like 5 years before I was born. But I guess World War II is just my strong suit. But yeah, once again, civil war happens in Yugoslavia, but this time there's a lot of outside forces who are looking to get involved. First off, we have the NATO forces who joined the war, sort of. These guys are going to be supporting all of the rebellions that popped up, so the Slovenians, the Croats, and the Macedonians. Whereas the Warsaw Pact, they're not going to necessarily support Serbia, but they're going to support their own new socialist government, because, the Tito thing happened, and, Tito and Stalin, and yeah. So from the borders of their surrounding countries, we see the Warsaw Pact get involved in this war, taking over crucial areas of Yugoslavia, aka Serbia and Montenegro. And we also see them start to kind of tamper with the rebellious forces, and this is going to kind of make the West mad, and they will sort of get involved with this war. So Western forces, now once again involved in wars that they shouldn't be involved in, are going to make landings along the Serbian coast. Of course, they're going to work with the blue and green and orange teams. However, they are mostly working on their own. We see Albania eventually get involved in this war on the side of the West, or they're more so complying with them, allowing them to move troops through. Turkey and Albania, I'm pretty sure were pretty close in the 90s. But with that, the West has an easier force into the Serbian area, and you eventually have the meeting of Western and Soviet troops. Now, this, of course, it's not going to escalate. I mean, maybe you thought it would, but it's not. And instead, they're more focused on just splitting up the remainder of Serbia. So the Soviets will go ahead and push through the remainder of this area, while the West focuses in on the Bosnian areas. We also, of course, see the Croats do their own thing, and they end up taking the rest of Bosnia. But an agreement is eventually met in order to stop the fighting and to prevent, any major global conflict over here. In this peace treaty here, we get something that is pretty similar to what happened in real life, except, the borders are a little bit switched around. So I tried it with Slovenia. It's not perfect. But with Croatia and Serbia, this is a little bit more original. It more so follows the ethnic groupings of where the Croats and the Serbs are in the Balkans. And what we have here is something that is, gonna maybe stir up some conflict in the future. The Slovenians, Croats, and Macedonians, or North Macedonians, are all on their own. They're their own independent countries. However, the remainder of Serbia and, of course, Montenegro and Bosnia were all puppeted, sort of, by the Soviet Union. So basically, they joined the Warsaw Pact. And with this now renewed pressure over here in the Balkans, Albania will go ahead and join NATO officially, since they were already working with them. The world is going to go ahead and stay quiet for a few years. Not much is going to happen. But eventually we do have the Warsaw Pact making another move, and this time they are going to be invading a country, and unfortunately it's the most recent country that was created. It's going to be North Macedonia. So the Warsaw Pact will go ahead and declare war on the small Balkan country, and even before NATO has time to react, North Macedonia is completely wiped off of the map. This peace treaty is pretty simple. However, it's different from what it would probably be. In my eyes, I think it would be more sense for the Macedonians to be split into two by the Bulgarians and the Yugoslavs, because they just broke away from the Serbians, or I guess Yugoslavia, and them being fully under control of the Yugoslavians again would probably not be best, because you would just get a rinse and repeat of civil war. So instead, it would make sense for the country to be divided into two. And you also get two birds with one stone, because Bulgaria would settle a border dispute, and they would also be able to control half of the country, solving any issues. All right, so Europe is pretty much split into two for the most part. Croatia will eventually join NATO, and at this point it's there's not much neutral countries left, and civil war, or not civil war, a continental war seems imminent. Or does it? Yeah, it seems imminent. Eventually something's gonna happen, right? And war breaks out between the two alliances. Now, how did the war start? It could be a multitude of factors. Most likely something that happened down here in the Balkans. But we do see a majority of the early action happening down here, so it is very likely that something happened here. But we do have the Croatians pushing into the Bosnian areas. We also see the Allies, or I guess NATO, push into the Macedonian areas, which essentially rise up against the Warsaw Pact. We also see NATO focusing on this coastal area, knocking out any sea access for the Serbians, even though I don't really know what that would do for them, since it's just Allied waters. Up north, though, is where we see things that are a little bit different. We see the Warsaw Pact having tremendous success invading into Western Germany. Now, Western Berlin is long gone. Obviously, it was deep in Soviet territory, but now they are pretty much just freelancing through the German countryside until eventually they meet the Netherlands. And at this point, the US is frantically sending troops over to Europe because, the Soviets are taking some pretty important areas. The Soviets then focusing on Denmark, hoping to take out the entrance to the Baltic Sea. They kind of do, well, what is happening? They pretty much do their own little amphibious invasion of the Copenhagen area and gain access towards the Baltic Sea, which, it might help them out a little bit, but Sweden controls the other part of it. So anyway, Copenhagen is gone and Denmark collapses. With this, the Soviets are able to refocus themselves down south and blitz across northern Germany. We see the capturing of Munich and the capturing of Frankfurt, and with this, West Germany is pretty much done for. Back down south, though, NATO is having a lot of success in taking out the Yugoslav area, and this is in most part thanks to the close proximity of countries like Italy, Greece, and Turkey. Bulgaria starts to get invaded, but over here in this part of Turkey, we see the Soviets start their own invasion, which will pretty much pull all Turkish troops from this front line in order to protect themselves from the rear. At this point, the whole world is kind of, I won't say they're divided between the two, but it's 1990 and the Soviet Union was just about to collapse in real life, so not a lot of countries were, strongly in favor of them. So it's kind of hard to judge who would join this war on their side other than their own alliances, and for that sake, I'm going to be keeping it solely just between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. There could be one exemption, being, Slovenia or Austria, but those are local countries which would be involved anyway. So yeah, no outside countries in this scenario. Back over here in Western Germany, the Soviets now reach into Belgium, almost to Slovenia. And with this, I keep calling them the Allies. It's because of the alternate future series, which is in my head. Also, if you want to know some information about the alternate future series, stick around to the end of the video. I got to talk about that. But you know, the UK and France, they're sending troops up north now. They were sending troops down over here and into here for Italy, but now they're focused on this because, you know, they're having PTSD from a little something called Blitzkrieg. The Netherlands pretty much get slapped around, and they are able to hold out in Amsterdam though. The Soviets capture Luxembourg, but not all hope is lost because the Americans are here, and that includes Canada as well. With reinforcements now on their front line, the NATO is able to push back the Soviets briefly in Germany, recapturing Frankfurt. They also are able to take back Luxembourg from Soviet grasp, and they work to move north, possibly covering and severing any supply lines going into this area over here, which will essentially stop the Soviets' advance towards Paris. In other news though, the Balkan front, which was going very well, is no longer going very well. The Warsaw Pact is able to effectively push back against it and even reaches the border of Croatia. We also see Turkey's troops leave officially, leading to, well, you know, Bulgaria pushing back. And over here in Turkey, they're getting pretty much clowned on. I mean, the Soviets have the advantage over here. They're familiar with the terrain. I mean, of course, Turkey is as well because it's their own country. But you know, the Caucasus are right here. Back up north to the German front, we see that the Americans and NATO as a whole is able to push back the Soviets into eastern Germany. We also see an effort to take back the Munich area, or I guess the Bavarian area, but that kind of falls short as the Soviets and the Warsaw Pact are able to hold a little bit of ground. Up north, we have these Soviets reactivating their plan to take Paris, and this goes pretty well at first. However, it eventually stalls out. NATO makes a landing in northern Denmark and start to liberate the areas of the peninsula where the Soviets were pretty lackluster in their defense. They do hold on strongly though to Copenhagen Island, because I don't know what the actual island is called, but NATO is able to slither around the coast, and this will prove to be a pretty big issue for the Soviets due to fortifications and, you know, the fact that the NATO is pretty close to encircling this large blob over here. So with two spearheads going towards each other and some really questionable defensive strategy by the Soviets, they start to pull troops from the Netherlands and Belgium and start to hold out instead over here in this part of Germany. They then work to push back these spearheads, and it goes pretty well, and they are once again safe for now. In order to bring a distraction to the Warsaw Pact, the Allies are going to just go ahead and start an incursion into this part of eastern Germany. Now this is pretty dangerous, but they do make sure to beef it up in order to stop it from falling, or I guess, you know, from getting, you know, encircled and brutally murdered. And this distraction does work pretty well, as they're able to call Soviet troops in the surrounding areas to draw back, and since, you know, they're doing that, they're able to broaden this little bubble. Back up north, NATO is able to recapture the entire German coast, and this is going to be a pretty big blow to the Soviets as they withdraw their troops even further, now without any kind of coastal defense from Allied ships. Down south in the Yugoslav area, everything is falling apart. The Albanians and the Greeks are pretty much all pushed back, and the Croatians' efforts are smashed. And eventually, the Warsaw Pact comes crushing down as Hungary and Serbia work together to invade parts of Croatia. Albania also is not being forgotten, they are being invaded. Eventually, the borders of Greece and Turkey are aligned with Warsaw Pact troops, although they aren't necessarily advancing. There was an effort to connect up with the Aegean Sea, in which they do. But other than that, this front will stall for now, as over here we have the Soviets focusing in on the coastal areas of Turkey. Back over in Europe, we see that the Allies are able to successfully take over Copenhagen Island after some, you know, casualties. There was a lot of people that died retaking that island. But you know, they're thinking it's going to be to their advantage. You know, Sweden is a neutral country, but they are leading toward the Allies, or I guess NATO, and allowing them to move their ships into the Baltic Sea, which allows them to, you know, bombard the coast of the Soviets. I mean, at this point, you know, nukes are a thing. ICBMs are developing and are a thing. So really, I mean, it's casual, conventional warfare in the sense that they're not going to use the weapons of mass destruction. Anyway, the Soviets are now going to go ahead and ignore the front over here. Well, they're not going to ignore it, but they're going to stop focusing on this front. You know, they were relaying this as their main front, but now they're more worried about what's happening down south in the Balkans because they have an advantage there. Soviet troops, which are now helping out Balkan troops, are able to crush Croatia and are able to pressure Greece even more as they are pushed to their peninsula. We see thrice fall and the city of Istanbul on its heels. However, back in Europe, we see the NATO people having great success, pushing back the Soviets completely out of Western Germany, up north, and even starting their own invasion into East Germany, of which they're able to successfully capture East Berlin within a couple of weeks, maybe months. And you know, this isn't like the biggest of blows to the Soviets. You know, it's not like they're losing their capital. You know, they still have a bunch of buffer countries in between them and the Allies, but you don't necessarily want to lose this, because the people in Germany are going to feel liberated, you know, from the Soviets, and they're going to probably want to rise up against them. So basically what we have here is not only East Germany getting conquered, but also East Germany rebelling against the Warsaw Pact, and these ideas will start to slowly spread throughout the other Warsaw Pact countries. But the Soviets, once again, being able to avoid their collapse, are able to tone down these rebellious thoughts to a sense to where it's not really that much of a threat for now. We see Slovenia getting invaded. I mentioned that they might get involved, but just not how. But they get invaded by the Soviets and the Balkans, and Italy is now under threat as Venice is captured. The Allies NATO at this point is thinking about pulling Austria into the war in order to, one, you know, allow them to set up a defense just in case the Warsaw Pact does invade, and that's all. There's only one reason. They're able to successfully push out the Soviets in this area and enter into Czechoslovakia, who would have collapsed by now, but since the Soviets didn't, they don't as well. And you know, it is likely that, you know, with the survival of the Soviet Union, we wouldn't necessarily see the Warsaw Pact stick together. It is likely that, you know, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia would, you know, have a civil war. It's possible that all these countries would still find a way to break away and form their own governments. And you know, I did mention like a couple of seconds ago, or maybe minutes ago, that the ideals of rebellion are slowly amping up in these countries. And with the NATO people entering into Poland, and you know, them already taking Prague, it's pretty much set on fire. Despite this, the Soviets are still going to pressure the NATO people, and they're going to continue to take land in Turkey, now reaching down into the Mediterranean Sea and causing this entire half of Turkey to surrender over. Now, I know Turkey is a fairly mountainous country over here in its eastern half, and yeah, I know, that's all I'm telling you. I know. You don't have to tell me in the comments. I also know Greece is fairly mountainous, but the Soviets are going to continue to push into Greece. And at this point, you know, the Soviets are at risk. They're losing land over here, and they're going to have to eventually pull troops from the Balkans in order to stop NATO's advance into Poland and Czechoslovakia. But there is also the risk of these countries rising up, you know, completely changing sides. Well, not Serbia, and you know, invading Serbia, and then you know, they have a whole front with NATO, and they don't really want that to happen. On the opposite sides of things, you know, NATO is seeing that the Soviets are going to eventually get Turkey, Greece, and maybe even Italy, and if that were to happen, then you know, these rising up countries, as you know, good as that would be for them, the Soviets would crush them. And eventually that would just lead to the map coming back to this very point where, you know, the Soviets control this land, and from there it would just be a war of attrition where the Soviets would have probably a slight advantage for having control over Turkey, Greece, and Italy. So NATO, seeing this, is going to offer peace to the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union, seeing this, is going to happily take that. They weren't expecting it, you know. They were expecting themselves to have to be the ones that go to the surrender table, but the NATO people are going there first, and we eventually have the Conference of Warsaw taking place. And no, I don't think a war between the Soviet Union, or I guess the Warsaw Pact, and NATO would actually have a conclusion in real life. If it isn't blown up by nukes, then I don't think either side wins, because it's just too much of a massive, ginormous European war. With World War II, it was a little bit more, you know, spotty. You know, you had Germany in the north, Italy in the south, and then you had Japan all the way there in Asia. But with this war, you basically just have East versus West, and winning that war is a lot more hard. Alright, so taking a look at this peace treaty here, it's pretty simple. Germany reunites, Poland gets the old splitsaroo, Czechia is released from Slovakia, or maybe vice versa, and well, nothing else can be seen, and that's because the rest of it is on the alliance map. So Albania is forced into the Warsaw Pact, Croatia is forced to be neutral, Slovakia remains, the East Poland is in the Warsaw Pact, West Poland is in the NATO Pact, and a portion of Turkey is either annexed or maybe it's made into a puppet by the Soviets. But other than that, not much changes. And we can see the difference between the before and after. So really, neither side gave up too much. I would say the Soviets maybe gave up a little bit more. But really, with the splitting of Poland, it probably wouldn't be like that. Maybe we would see the border being more so like over here instead of way over here. But I just decided to do it based off of the World War II borders, sort of. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's scenario. Now, also, you know, if we want to take a look at the future, maybe we see Sweden join as well as Finland. You know, with the Soviets threat, perhaps they see a more urgent opportunity to join. You know, they might invade into them. If not, I don't really see anyone else joining the Warsaw Pact in Europe, so that's how that would maybe play out. And honestly, the Soviet Union would probably survive if it didn't collapse. No, really. So basically, by saying what if the Soviet Union didn't collapse, we're putting in the fact that they're immortal now? Is that what we're saying? That doesn't really seem fair. But yeah, once again, that's going to do it for today's video. Now, about the alternate future series, I made a community post, so go check that out. But I plan on making a really big project surrounding the alternate future series. It would be like a mini movie. I wouldn't necessarily call it a movie because it's not going to be like an hour or 2 hours long. It's gonna be like maybe 5 minutes long, maybe. But it would be a big project, and I would invest a lot of money into it. I would have different voice actors for stuff, whole animator. I would have to do music. I would basically be producing my own film. And with the release of the most recent alternate futures video, I was really hoping that that video would do really well, and to prove that, you know, this series deserves what I'm about to be putting into it. However, the most recent video performed the worst out of all videos have performed in the last 5 weeks, which is really not a good sign. So now it has me questioning if I should actually do this project or not, or maybe even if I should continue the alternate future series, because I do have a plan to create a what if civilization reset series. That is a thing that I plan to do, but I don't want to have 2 series at the same time. So I want to finish alternate future before I get into that. Now, with that being said, alternate future season 2, if I want to do that project thing, it would be a perfect bridge from that to the next series. You know, we would have an ending to that. You know, we'd have a new series starting, and that project will kind of fine line that transition from one series to another. But the issue is the series isn't doing well, and I don't want to have to put, I don't say I don't have to, because obviously I don't have to, but I don't want to invest a lot of money and time, you know, and get all these people to put in a lot of effort for this big project if the series as a whole isn't doing well, and thus that video and slash project slash movie doesn't do well as well. So what I'm saying is that, like, I'm worried about the performance of the project, because obviously, you know, I want it to do well. You know, maybe I could call it a personal project, because filmmaking and stuff like that is something that I'm actually interested in, as like maybe a future career if YouTube doesn't work out. And so, you know, maybe putting my time and effort into this project should be something that I should do, because it's for my own personal self, not just you guys. But at the same time, I feel like if I put it out there, you have to have the context for the entire series, and if no one's watching the entire series, the project isn't going to make sense and no one's going to watch it. So really, I'm kind of like stuck in between. I don't know what to do right now. I'm pushing to maybe continue it. You know, I'm writing a script right now that's taking forever. But yeah, just let me know what you think in the comments. Go check out the community post and give me your input there. And yeah, that's gonna do it for today's video. So if you guys did enjoy it, make sure to show some support, and I will see you guys in the next video. And of course, thank you to all the super fans, which include Matthew Newman, Yam, Kylie Speaks Plays, Shadow Gamer Z, Deva Edits, Mr. Bonk 7, Hammer Toad 45, Patrick Clauser, Connor the Gamer, Texan Cowboy Cheese, Poland Country Ball, Yakko, Nevada Garbage Trucks, DW Cool Dude, Soviet Ball, and Serminator. Once again, thank you guys.